The email arrived with a sharp ping, its words laced with contempt. "She can't afford a lawyer." My heart tightened, but my hand stayed steady. I glanced at the framed photo of Emma and me on my desk. The reason I was fighting. The scent of fresh ink filled the air as I attached the invoice, my lawyer's fee a testament to my determination. Still, I couldn't help but smile quietly. They thought they could break me, but they underestimated a mother's will. When this was over, I'd show them how wrong they were. All right, before we dive into this crazy story, do me a favor. Subscribe and tell us where you're watching from. The phone rang as the early morning light crept through the blinds of Vivian Matthews's apartment in Midtown Manhattan. She glanced at the screen. David Langford, her lawyer. Her heart skipped a beat. It was too early for good news. Vivian answered, trying to keep her voice steady, though the tightness in her chest threatened to betray her calm exterior. "David, what's going on?" "Vivian," he started, his tone measured but grave. "We just got the paperwork. Robert's filed for full custody of Emma." Her breath hitched, but she kept her voice even. "Full custody?" "Yes. He's making a play for everything. He's trying to take her away from you." Vivian clenched the phone, her fingers tightening around it as if it could somehow crush the injustice she felt rising in her chest. She felt a cold knot settle in her stomach. "He knows that's not going to happen, right?" "I'm afraid it's more serious than just a power play. Robert's lawyer is already claiming you can't afford the fight, that you don't have the financial resources to keep this going." Vivian's jaw tightened. She was used to people underestimating her. But this? This was personal. "That's absurd," she said, though the words tasted bitter. "I've built my business from the ground up. I'm not some woman who can be dismissed." "I know," David said quickly, his voice a reassurance. "But it's the angle they're taking. They're going to try to paint you as financially unstable, incapable of offering Emma the kind of future they believe she deserves." Vivian's eyes narrowed, a cold fury flooding her veins. "That's a cheap shot. I don't need them to tell me what's best for my daughter." She swallowed hard, her throat tightening. "What are they going to say next? That I'm not even a fit mother?" David paused. "That might be the case. They're trying to create doubt. The question they're asking is simple. Does she have the means to fight this? And Robert's going to throw every cent he has into this. He's not playing fair." Vivian stood by the window, staring out at the distant skyline of New York. Her city. The city she had fought to carve out a place in. The wind from the open window tugged at her hair as her thoughts spun. She thought of Emma. Of the way her daughter's face lit up when she came home from work. The way Emma clung to her. The way their world was built on nothing but love and trust. How could anyone think she wouldn't protect that with every last breath in her body? "I'll fight," Vivian said firmly, her voice no longer betraying any weakness. "I don't care what they throw at me. This is about Emma, and I'll do whatever it takes." David was silent for a moment, perhaps assessing her tone, but he finally spoke, his voice steady with the conviction she had expected. "I'll start preparing the strategy, Vivian. We're going to need everything we've got, and we're going to expose Robert for the manipulator he is." Vivian nodded, a fire igniting in her chest. "Do it. Whatever it takes. I don't care if they think I can't afford this fight. I'm not backing down." There was a brief pause, then David added, "I'll get on it right away. You're not alone in this. We'll fight for Emma." She exhaled, feeling the weight of the moment settle on her. "Thank you, David. Keep me posted." The call ended, but the quiet left her with a growing sense of resolve. Vivian walked over to her desk, her fingers dancing over the glass surface as she thought about what was coming. This wasn't just a battle over money or custody. It was a war for her family, and she'd be damned if Robert was going to waltz in and destroy everything she had worked for. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts, and before she could respond, the door swung open. It was Jennifer, her best friend and business partner, standing in the doorway with a look of concern on her face. "Vivian, what's going on?" Jennifer asked, seeing the grim expression on her face. She stepped inside, her eyes quickly assessing the tension. "Robert's filed for full custody of Emma," Vivian said, her voice clipped, but her eyes still burning with determination. "And his lawyer's already trying to use the fact that they think I can't afford the fight against me. He's trying to make it about money." Jennifer's jaw dropped, her eyes widening in disbelief. "What? How the hell can they—" "I don't know," Vivian interrupted, holding up a hand. "But it's not going to matter. I won't let it matter. This isn't about the money. It's about Emma." Jennifer's expression softened, and she walked over to Vivian, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "You've got this. You've always got this." Vivian smiled faintly, appreciating the support, but inside, she was already gearing up for the fight of her life. She would not let Robert tear their world apart. She couldn't. As she turned back to the window, she thought about the taunt from Robert's lawyer. She won't be able to afford this fight. Vivian's lips pressed into a thin line. The woman had no idea who she was dealing with. Her daughter was worth every penny, every ounce of energy, every sleepless night. And if Robert thought he could win by outspending her, he was about to learn just how wrong he was. "Let them try," she muttered to herself, her voice steady and cold as steel. And with that, she made a silent vow to herself. She would fight. She would win. And they would never take Emma from her. The conference room at Langford and Associates was sleek, minimalist, and cold. Everything a high-powered law firm was supposed to be. But to Vivian Matthews, it felt like a battlefield. The glossy mahogany table, the rows of leather chairs, the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the skyline of New York. All of it faded into the background as she settled into the chair across from David Langford. David was already flipping through a stack of legal papers, his brow furrowed with concentration. He wasn't just her lawyer, he was her ally, her rock in this fight. And today, she needed him to be the strategist who would lead them to victory. Vivian exhaled sharply, adjusting her posture. She hadn't slept much since that phone call. Robert's move had shaken her to her core, and even though she had sworn to herself that she wouldn't back down, the reality of it was settling in like a heavy weight. "David, what's the next step?" Her voice was calm, but the undercurrent of tension was undeniable. David looked up from the paperwork and smiled at her, a sharp, reassuring smile that said he was confident. "We're going to fight, Vivian. The first thing we need is a strategy that can outlast whatever Robert throws at us." He pushed a file toward her. "This is everything we need to get started. Financials, evidence, statements. We've got a strong case. Robert's accusations about your financial instability, we'll obliterate them." Vivian's fingers traced the edge of the folder, her eyes scanning the documents briefly. It was the reality of what lay ahead. She could almost feel the weight of the case pressing down on her, not just in legal terms, but emotionally. She leaned back in her chair, her gaze flickering to the city below. Her thoughts turned to Emma, the little girl who had always been her anchor, her joy. What if this fight took too much out of her? What if the strain of it all, on Emma, on her own psyche, was more than they could handle? "David, I know we have a strong case," Vivian began, her voice tight with an emotion she wasn't ready to name. "But I'm worried about Emma, about how all of this is going to affect her. I can't bear the thought of her being caught in the middle of this. What if she gets hurt?" David's expression softened, and for a moment, he was no longer just her lawyer, but a man who understood the weight of a mother's love. He leaned forward, his voice lower now, as if speaking to a friend rather than a client. "Vivian, you've been Emma's rock for years. This fight, it's about giving her a future, a stable one. You're not alone in this. We're going to make sure that we not only win this battle but make sure Robert's manipulation comes to light. He's not going to get away with this." Vivian closed her eyes for a moment, the words sinking in. She had known Robert to be ruthless, but this felt like something worse. His behavior had always been self-serving. But this was an attack on the one thing that mattered most to her. I know," she murmured. "But sometimes, I wonder if we're both too deep into this. What if the toll is too much for Emma? I don't want her to feel like this is all my fault." David placed a hand on the table, steadying himself before responding, his gaze unflinching. "Vivian, you're doing the right thing. If Robert wins, you'll both suffer in ways that you can't even imagine. But if we win, you give Emma the one thing she needs, a safe, stable home. You've built your life on your own terms. And now, we're going to build that future for Emma." Vivian nodded, though the worry in her chest didn't completely subside. She had fought so hard for everything she had, but this was a new kind of fight. "I want to make sure we leave no stone unturned," she said firmly, setting her jaw. "I want to know everything about Robert's finances. Everything. If he's hiding anything, I need to know. He's playing dirty, and I won't let him win just because he has more money." David's eyes sparkled with approval. "Already ahead of you, I'm bringing in a financial investigator. We'll uncover whatever he's hiding. If there's one thing we know, it's that Robert's been juggling money, assets, everything. We'll get the proof we need." Vivian sat forward, the fire in her eyes reigniting. "Good. I don't care what it costs. We're in this for the long haul. I don't care about the money, David. I just want Emma, and I'm willing to fight for her. Every step of the way." David gave a slow nod, his expression hardening with determination. "Then we're going to hit him where it hurts. We'll expose everything. The financials, his lies, the way he's been manipulating this entire situation. And we'll make sure that the court sees what he's really about." Vivian felt a flicker of hope in her chest, a rare moment of clarity amid the storm. She had her lawyer, she had her allies, and more than anything, she had her own unbreakable will. This fight wasn't just about winning in court. It was about showing Emma that nothing was more important than family, than standing up for what was right. But as she glanced at the clock, a sinking feeling took hold. Time was ticking. Robert was out there, plotting his next move, and Vivian couldn't afford to waste any more time. "I'm ready," she said, her voice unwavering now. "Let's do this." David gave her a final reassuring look before standing up, grabbing the file and moving toward the door. "We'll start preparing immediately. You've got a long road ahead, but you're not walking it alone." Vivian took a deep breath, straightening her shoulders. She wasn't just going to fight for Emma's future, she was going to show Robert that he couldn't tear them apart. Not now. Not ever. As David left, Vivian's gaze drifted to the photograph on her desk. A smiling Emma in her arms, a moment frozen in time. That little girl was all that mattered now, and Vivian was willing to do anything to protect her. The phone call came on a Tuesday afternoon, as Vivian sat at her desk, her mind swirling with the weight of the case. She had been glued to her computer screen for hours, reviewing financial statements, emails, and any trace of Robert's manipulations that might provide an edge. Her thoughts were running in a dozen directions at once, but nothing could quite prepare her for the next round of insult. The number on her screen was unfamiliar, but the area code gave it away. Robert's lawyer. Vivian's stomach twisted, but she picked up the phone without hesitation. "Vivian." The voice on the other end was cool and professional, but there was an unmistakable edge of superiority. "This is Natalie Grayson, representing Robert Collins. I'm reaching out with a proposal." Vivian's fingers tightened on the receiver. "A proposal?" she asked, her voice measured but laced with suspicion. Yes. A proposal to settle the case quickly. Robert's willing to negotiate a financial payout for custody. A small one, of course. Something reasonable given your current financial standing. Vivian could feel the blood rushing to her head, but she forced herself to stay calm. What exactly do you mean by reasonable? She asked, her tone now cutting. There's no need to drag this out, Vivian. You can settle, walk away with a payout, and we can all avoid the stress of a lengthy trial, Natalie continued, as if offering a peaceful solution to a mere misunderstanding. Vivian's hand clenched into a fist. This isn't about money, Natalie. This is about my daughter. It's about what's best for Emma, and Robert knows that. If he wants a fight, he'll get one. There was a pause, and then Natalie's voice became a little more insistent, almost dismissive. Vivian, let's be clear. You don't have the resources to continue fighting this. Robert has the means to drag this out indefinitely. You don't. Vivian's chest tightened, her breathing shallow for a moment as the anger coiled up inside her like a snake. They think I can be bought off. She knew they were trying to play on her nerves to make her feel small, but she wouldn't let them. Not now. Not ever. I won't let them dictate this, Vivian said, her voice ice-cold, every word deliberate. I'm not interested in a settlement. You tell Robert that if he wants to take this to court, we'll see him there. I'll fight him with everything I have. Natalie's tone shifted, but only slightly. Very well. But don't say I didn't warn you. The call ended abruptly, and Vivian was left staring at the phone in her hand. Her anger simmered beneath her skin, but she wasn't going to give Robert or his lawyer the satisfaction of seeing her lose control. She exhaled slowly, running her hand through her hair. She wasn't going to let them chip away at her. If Robert thought that a financial settlement would buy him Emma, he was gravely mistaken. This was more than money. It was her daughter. And if he wanted a fight, he'd get one. Vivian stood up and walked to the window, staring out at the bustling city below, her thoughts churning. The skyline was the same, vast, impersonal, and full of possibilities. But today, it felt like a reminder of everything at stake. She needed to keep going. She needed to stay focused. A knock at the door brought her out of her thoughts. It was David, holding a folder, his expression tight with purpose. Vivian, he said as he entered. I've already started preparing the financial documents. We're digging into Robert's business dealings. He's got to have some hidden assets. We'll expose every angle. Good, Vivian said, her voice sharp. We need everything. We're going to hit him hard, and tell me what you've found so far. David set the folder down and opened it, pulling out a series of statements. I've had our investigator pull records from Robert's companies. There's a lot of moving money, assets in offshore accounts. He's been hiding more than we thought. Vivian nodded, her mind racing. This is it. This is the opening we need. We'll use this. He's trying to play the poor, helpless father in front of the court. But we'll show the truth. David's eyes flickered with something almost resembling admiration. We're going to make sure Robert can't escape this. His financial manipulations won't just hurt him, they'll show who he really is. If he thinks this is just about money, he's got another thing coming. Vivian paced the room, her steps purposeful. He's counting on me backing down. He thinks I'm just going to give in. But I won't. Not now. Not ever. David closed the folder with a snap. You've got the strength to make it through this. We'll show them that. I'm not just fighting for me, Vivian said, her voice low but firm. I'm fighting for Emma. I won't let them take her from me. David watched her for a long moment, then nodded. Let's get to work. We'll keep pushing forward. We'll show Robert that he's not the one who gets to control this. Vivian turned her gaze to the window again, her eyes locking on the horizon. There was no turning back now. She had crossed the line, and there was no way to retreat. Robert had made his move, and now she was making hers. She would fight until the very end, and nothing would make her give up. The battle had only just begun, and Vivian wasn't about to lose. The papers arrived on a gray Thursday afternoon, the rain tapping against the windows of Vivian's sleek apartment. She had just finished a meeting with Jennifer, finalizing plans for their next big business pitch, when the courier knocked on her door. The moment she saw the envelope, her heart sank. It was from Robert's lawyer. With trembling hands, she tore it open, the words on the page blurry at first. But as she read them again, more clearly this time, they hit like a punch to the gut. Robert was filing for full custody of Emma. He was claiming that Vivian's work schedule was unstable and that she couldn't provide the proper care for their daughter. He was playing the same card, pretending he was the better parent, when, in reality, he was just playing a game for control. Vivian felt her breath catch in her throat. The injustice of it burned in her chest. She had built a life for herself and Emma, a life that was stable, secure, and full of love. And Robert? He had the nerve to claim that she couldn't care for their daughter? It made her blood boil. Her phone buzzed beside her, and she glanced at the screen. David. Vivian, he said, his voice calm but measured. I saw the filing. I've got the documents in front of me, too. I can't believe it, she muttered, trying to steady her breathing. He's claiming that I can't take care of Emma, that my work schedule is too unpredictable. It's such a lie. I've been the one constant in her life. How can he even think this is a viable argument? David's voice softened. I know, but we can use this to our advantage. The fact that he's making this claim tells me he's desperate. He knows that a fight over custody is a long road, and he's hoping you'll back down. Vivian sat back in her chair, looking out the window at the rain streaking down the glass. She clenched her fists, feeling the weight of this battle settle over her. She could hear Robert's words echoing in her mind. Unstable. Unfit. He was trying to make her doubt herself, trying to make her feel like she didn't belong in Emma's life. But she wasn't going to let him win. Not like this. I'm not backing down, Vivian said, her voice gaining strength. What do we do now? David didn't hesitate. We file a motion for temporary custody. It's the best way to show the court that Emma has a stable environment with you. We'll present evidence that you're the one who's been there for her, emotionally and physically, and that she's thriving under your care. The fact that Robert's trying to make you out as an absent mother will backfire. Vivian nodded, her resolve hardening. She knew David was right. They couldn't afford to let Robert get away with this lie. It was time to prepare for the battle that was coming, no matter how long it took. Get started, Vivian said, her voice low and firm. We'll fight this tooth and nail. David's tone lightened slightly. You've got this, Vivian. You've always had it. Let's get to work. The line went dead, and Vivian stared at the phone in her hand. She knew this wasn't just a legal battle, it was a war for her family. But she was ready. She had to be. As the rain continued to pour outside, Vivian's mind raced through the logistics. What kind of evidence could she present to make sure the court saw the truth? She wasn't just Emma's mother, she was her protector. Minutes later, she sat down at her desk, typing an email to Emma's school, to her daughter's pediatrician, to her therapist. She would gather every letter, every testimonial, every scrap of evidence that showed how healthy, how happy, how well cared for Emma was under her roof. Vivian's fingers flew over the keys. She knew the court would scrutinize every detail. They would want to know how Emma spent her days, what her routine was like, how she was doing emotionally, and Vivian would make sure they knew. She wasn't just a busy mother with a career. She was a mother who had created a loving, stable home. And she wasn't going to let Robert's lies tear that apart. The doorbell rang, snapping her from her thoughts. She stood quickly, her heart pounding as she moved toward the door. When she opened it, she found Jennifer standing there, her face tight with concern. Vivian, Jennifer started, her voice shaking slightly. But she stopped when she saw the expression on Vivian's face. "I just got the papers," Vivian said, her voice hoarse. "Robert's filing for full custody. He's claiming that my work schedule makes me an unfit mother." Jennifer's eyes widened and she stepped forward, hugging her tightly. "Oh, Viv, I'm so sorry. But you're not going to let him win, right?" Vivian pulled away, the anger in her chest rising again. "No. He thinks he can destroy everything I've worked for. But he's wrong. I'm going to show the court just how wrong he is." Jennifer nodded firmly. "You've got this. We're with you." Vivian's eyes flicked to the documents on the table and then back to her best friend. "I need you to help me. We need to make sure we have everything. Testimonies, evidence, records. I won't let him get away with this. He's not taking Emma from me." Jennifer's expression hardened, a silent vow forming between them. "I'll help you gather whatever you need. We'll fight this together." Vivian took a deep breath, her resolve solidifying in her chest. This was only the beginning. Robert had fired the first shot, but Vivian was ready. This wasn't just about custody. It was about fighting for everything she loved. And she wouldn't stop until she won. The courthouse was imposing, its granite walls towering above Vivian as she walked up the steps, a bead of sweat forming at the back of her neck despite the cool air. Inside, the sterile scent of polished wood and paper mixed with the weight of something deeper, the feeling that her entire future and Emma's rested on the outcome of this battle. She wasn't alone. Jennifer stood beside her, her face set with determination, and David was just a step behind, carrying the heavy folder of evidence they had spent countless hours preparing. The entire room felt like it was closing in around her, but Vivian forced herself to breathe deeply. This wasn't just about money. It was about Emma's future, and she wasn't going to let Robert strip that away. David's hand brushed her shoulder briefly, a small but reassuring gesture, before he moved toward the front of the room. The judge, an older man with graying hair and a steady gaze, glanced up as the parties took their seats. Robert sat on the opposite side of the room, his expression unreadable, but Carolyn, his girlfriend, sat beside him, her lips pursed as she whispered something in his ear. The court session began with the usual formalities, but the tension in the air was palpable. Vivian's heart hammered in her chest, but she didn't allow herself to falter. She was here to fight. And Robert's lawyer fired the first shot almost immediately. "Your Honor," Natalie Grayson began, her voice smooth and practiced. "We are here today because it is clear that Vivian Matthews is an unfit mother. She has failed to provide a stable home for her daughter, Emma. Her work schedule is unstable, and she cannot possibly meet Emma's emotional needs while juggling a high-stress career." Vivian felt her pulse spike, the insult sinking deep into her gut. She fought the urge to rise from her seat and scream, but David's calm hand on her arm kept her grounded. She turned to him, but his eyes were already locked on the proceedings. This was just the opening salvo. He was waiting for his moment. "And what's more," Natalie continued, her voice now icy and pointed, "Vivian's focus has been on her business ventures, leaving her daughter in the care of hired help while she travels for work. This, Your Honor, is not what a child needs." Vivian's stomach twisted. It was a deliberate, calculated attack on her very identity. They were trying to break her, she thought, but they don't know me. David stood, his posture confident, his voice sharp as he addressed the judge. "Your Honor, what we are hearing here is an attempt to paint Vivian Matthews as absent. Nothing could be further from the truth." He turned to the court, his eyes piercing as he spoke. "Vivian is a successful entrepreneur who has built a thriving business while also being a constant and loving presence in Emma's life. The evidence here," he motioned toward the pile of documents he had gathered, "shows that Emma is happy, healthy, and well cared for under Vivian's roof." She has everything she needs emotionally, physically, and financially. Vivian kept her gaze forward, but her eyes welled with unshed tears. She had fought for this life, for this stability, for Emma, and now Robert was trying to tear it down. But David was right. The truth was on their side. The judge nodded slowly, his gaze shifting from David to the documents. Robert's lawyer, clearly annoyed, opened her mouth to protest, but David wasn't finished. And furthermore, David continued, his voice now carrying an edge, we have information about Robert's financial situation, evidence of questionable practices, mismanagement of funds, and a lifestyle that is far from stable. We believe that this behavior makes him unsuitable to care for a child, especially one as young as Emma. He is clearly motivated by his ego, not Emma's well-being. The air seemed to thicken. Robert's face flushed with anger, but Vivian knew it was nothing compared to what was coming. The judge raised a hand, signaling that he wanted to hear more, and David was quick to oblige. We've also had statements from Emma's teachers, her pediatrician, and her therapist. Testimonies that confirm Emma is thriving under Vivian's care. She is involved in every aspect of Emma's life. She's present, she's loving, and she's invested in her future. Vivian sat back slightly, her heart swelling as she heard David defend her so fiercely. He wasn't just her lawyer, he was fighting for their family too. But then, just as Vivian thought they might have the upper hand, Carolyn stood. She wasn't just an observer anymore. She was stepping into the fray, a calculated move that Vivian knew would only add fuel to the fire. Your Honor, Carolyn said, her voice soft but dripping with intent. While Vivian may be involved in her business, she's clearly out of touch with Emma's needs. Emma has told us on several occasions that she feels neglected when her mother is away. She feels abandoned. The courtroom went silent, and Vivian's blood ran cold. Carolyn's words were a weapon, carefully crafted, aimed directly at her heart. Vivian could feel her composure slipping. She had expected a fight. But this? This was an attack on everything she had worked for, everything she had believed in. David was already on his feet, his voice cutting through the tension. Your Honor, he said, his tone unwavering, I'd like to remind the court that children are resilient, and Emma is no exception. She has a strong bond with her mother, and all the reports indicate that she is emotionally secure. If anything, these claims are nothing but manipulation designed to undermine Vivian's credibility. Vivian closed her eyes for a brief moment, taking a deep breath. She could feel the weight of their words, the weight of the battle pressing on her shoulders. But she knew something Robert didn't. She wasn't going to lose. Not now. Not when Emma's future was at stake. As the hearing continued, Vivian steadied herself. They were trying to tear her down. But with every word, every move they made, they were only building her resolve. She would fight. She would win. And no matter how many twists came her way, she would never let go of Emma. The next day in court, the stakes had never been higher. The session began with a sharp edge of tension as Robert and Carolyn's team took the floor once again. The courtrooms were full of cold, sterile light, but for Vivian, the room felt suffocating, as if the walls were closing in. She sat between David and Jennifer, her palms flat on the polished table, her gaze fixed ahead. She wasn't going to flinch. Not now. Not when it was all on the line. Robert's lawyer, Natalie Grayson, stood up first, smoothing out the papers in front of her. Your Honor, she began, her tone dripping with the same practiced precision as before. We would like to bring up the issue of Vivian Matthews's work schedule once more. She paused, letting the words hang in the air like a sword waiting to drop. While we acknowledge that she has built a successful career, we must reiterate that her ability to properly care for Emma is compromised by her irregular hours and frequent travel. Vivian's chest tightened, But she held her ground, her eyes flicking briefly to David. She wasn't going to let them twist her choices, her dedication to Emma, into something that could be used against her. David was quick to respond, standing tall as he addressed the judge, his voice calm but firm. Your Honor, while it is true that Vivian's career requires flexibility, the evidence we've provided has already shown that Emma's care is never compromised. She's always been present for every important moment in Emma's life, and the fact that she has successfully built a business speaks to her ability to manage her time effectively. He paused, locking eyes with Robert's team. What is being painted here as instability is, in fact, a life built with love, structure, and balance. Emma is healthy and happy under her mother's care, which is the only thing that matters. Robert's lawyer didn't back down, her voice gaining a subtle edge. But, Your Honor, what we are seeing is a mother who has placed her career before her child. A child needs stability, and that includes emotional availability. Emma has expressed feelings of neglect during the times her mother is away. Vivian felt the sting of the words, but she steeled herself, refusing to let the emotional punch throw her off course. She had built a life for Emma, a life where she always made sure her daughter came first, where love and stability flowed freely. David didn't miss a beat. If I may, Your Honor, he said, flipping open his folder. We've already submitted letters from Emma's school, from her therapist, and from her pediatrician. They've all attested to Emma's thriving emotional well-being and her strong bond with her mother. These claims of neglect are not only false, they're a deliberate attempt to manipulate the court's perception. Vivian inhaled deeply, feeling the weight of the battle settle on her shoulders. They weren't just attacking her mothering skills, they were attacking her very identity. But they weren't going to get away with it. Not while she still had breath in her body. The judge remained silent for a moment, considering the back and forth. But then, like a storm-gathering force, Robert's lawyer pushed forward again. Your Honor, she said, her voice a bit more insistent, if we may, Vivian Matthews has been offered a settlement in this case. A reasonable financial agreement that would allow for a quick resolution without further harm to Emma. We believe this would be in the best interest of the child. Vivian's heart sank at the suggestion. It was the third time now that Robert's team had tried to push her into a settlement, something that would guarantee them a quick victory, something that would buy them the upper hand. But she wasn't about to back down. Not now. Not after everything they had put her through. David leaned over, his voice low but firm. Vivian, they might try to pressure you into a settlement again. They'll say it's in Emma's best interest, but what they really want is to end this quickly. Don't let them. Vivian gripped the edge of the table, her knuckles turning white. I won't, she whispered, her voice tight with emotion. I'm not letting them buy me off. David's eyes locked onto hers, and for a moment, they didn't need to say anything more. She was resolute. She wasn't going to let Robert and Carolyn take the easy way out by pressuring her into making a choice that wasn't hers to make. Not when her daughter's future was on the line. The judge, sensing the growing tension, cleared his throat. I believe we've heard enough for today. We will reconvene in 2 weeks. I expect all remaining evidence to be submitted by that time. The gavel fell with a sharp echo, and the room shifted. The fight wasn't over. The war was just beginning. As Vivian stood to leave, her heart raced. But she was no longer afraid. She was ready. Ready for the battles ahead. Ready to show everyone that she wasn't just a mother fighting for her daughter's future. She was a force to be reckoned with. And Robert? He hadn't seen the last of her. David's voice cut through her thoughts. We'll be back in court soon, he said, giving her a reassuring nod. But for now, let's make sure we're ready for the next move. You're doing great. Don't let them shake you. Vivian nodded, her jaw tight. She wasn't just fighting for custody anymore. This was about her voice being heard, about her life, her choices, and her love for Emma being respected. And if Robert thought this was a game, then he was about to find out that the game had just changed. The courtroom had an air of quiet anticipation as the day of testimony wore on. Each moment seemed to stretch, a palpable weight hanging over everything. Vivian sat beside David, Jennifer by her side, her fingers twisting in her lap, all of them waiting for the next bombshell. The walls of the room, once intimidating, now felt like a lifeline. This was the place where the truth would finally be heard. Robert's lawyer, Natalie Grayson, had spent the morning attempting to paint Robert as the perfect father, the one with the stable home, the ideal environment for Emma to thrive. But every word seemed to slide off David's defense like water from stone. Vivian's resolve was growing stronger by the minute as she watched her lawyer lay out the facts, piece by piece, like a jigsaw puzzle of undeniable truth. David stood up, his demeanor sharp, confident, and focused as ever. He walked to the front of the room, holding a folder filled with documents. "Your Honor," he began, his voice steady, "we would like to present additional evidence. This concerns Robert Collins's financial situation." Vivian's heart quickened, but she kept her gaze fixed on David, knowing that this moment could shift everything in their favor. David placed a set of bank statements and receipts on the table before the judge. These documents show that Mr. Collins has been hiding substantial assets that he has not disclosed in his financial statements. The transactions in these records indicate that he has been deliberately concealing large sums of money in offshore accounts and shell companies. Vivian could feel a cold thrill spread through her as David continued. She had known that Robert was hiding things, but now it was being exposed, right in front of the judge's eyes. She had always suspected that he wasn't the man he pretended to be. Now the court could see the truth. Robert was a manipulator, someone who thought he could control everything, including Emma's future. Furthermore, David added, his voice cutting through the silence, these hidden assets suggest that Mr. Collins has been mismanaging his finances for years. This kind of instability, coupled with his reckless spending habits, makes him unfit to care for a child. Vivian could see Robert's jaw tighten across the room. He was trying to keep his composure, but it was clear the cracks were starting to show. His empire of lies was beginning to crumble. David paused, giving the judge a moment to absorb the evidence. He wasn't done yet. "We've also collected testimonies from Emma's teachers and her school counselor," he said, sliding more papers across the table. "These reports confirm that Emma's emotional well-being is thriving under Vivian's care. She has been consistently praised for her positive behavior, academic success, and emotional stability." Vivian's heart swelled as David continued to present the overwhelming evidence that painted her as a dedicated, loving mother, while Robert's image was slowly falling apart. Emma's school had been her sanctuary, the place where her daughter had always felt safe. Vivian had made sure of that. Robert's lawyer shifted in her seat, her face pinched with frustration. "Your Honor, we would like to present additional evidence that shows Emma is far more comfortable and settled in Robert's home. She has expressed a strong preference for living with him." Vivian could feel the sharp sting of their words, but she didn't flinch. This was expected. She had been prepared for this. She knew the games they played, and she was ready to fight back. David stood and turned toward the judge. "With all due respect, Your Honor," he began, his voice cutting through the tension in the room. "We've heard claims that Emma prefers to live with her father, but those claims are not supported by any facts. Emma's attachment to her mother has been well documented. She has a strong, healthy bond with Vivian, as confirmed by her pediatrician, therapist, and teachers." Vivian took a steadying breath, her grip on the armrest of the chair tightening. The accusations they were throwing at her were only making her more determined. They were grasping at straws, trying to make her doubt herself, but she wouldn't allow it. David's next move was calculated. He called in Emma's therapist, Dr. Lawrence, to testify about the emotional bond Emma shared with her mother. The door to the courtroom opened and Dr. Lawrence entered, a calm presence in the chaos of the proceedings. He walked up to the stand and sat down, his demeanor professional but warm. "I have been working with Emma for the past year," he began, his voice steady, "and I can confirm that Emma has expressed no desire to live anywhere else but with her mother. In my professional opinion, Vivian Matthews has been the most consistent and supportive figure in Emma's life. Their bond is strong, and Emma is emotionally secure in her care." Vivian could feel a rush of relief wash over her as Dr. Lawrence's words filled the room. This wasn't just an opinion. It was a professional assessment from someone who had seen her daughter thrive under her care. This was the truth. For the first time in the proceedings, Robert's face betrayed a flicker of doubt. He sat back in his chair, his hands clenched into fists, and Vivian could see the anger simmering just beneath the surface. He wasn't used to losing control, and it was becoming painfully clear that the walls were closing in on him. David's voice broke through the silence. "Your Honor, the evidence before you speaks for itself." Robert's financial instability and his inability to care for Emma in a stable, loving environment should disqualify him from any custodial rights. Vivian looked around the courtroom, her eyes meeting the judge's. For the first time, she allowed herself to feel a glimmer of hope. She had fought so hard for this moment, fought for Emma, fought for their future. The truth was finally being revealed, and Robert's lies were no longer able to hide in the shadows. The judge nodded slowly, the weight of the evidence settling in. Vivian's heart raced as she realized this could be the turning point. They were closer to winning than ever before. But as the judge prepared to adjourn for the day, Robert's lawyer leaned over to whisper something in his ear. Vivian knew they weren't out of the woods yet. Robert's team would fight tooth and nail, but she was ready. The fight was far from over. But for the first time in a long while, Vivian knew that the truth was on her side. And that was a force nothing could defeat. The courtroom was eerily quiet as both sides prepared for their closing statements. Vivian could feel the weight of every eye in the room, the judge's gaze steady and piercing. She had been through hell to get here, but now, as the final moment loomed, it felt almost unreal. Like a long, hard climb had brought her to the edge of something much larger than herself. David stood beside her, his posture still confident but his jaw set with the weight of the case they had built. He had fought for every shred of evidence, each testimony, every financial document. The truth had been laid bare. But there was still one final hurdle, Robert's last-ditch attempt to hold on to everything he thought he could control. "Your Honor?" Natalie Grayson began, her voice smooth and measured, as if the past days of cross-examination hadn't ruffled her at all. "We stand here because of one simple truth. Robert Collins is Emma's father. He has parental rights, and we believe it is his right to raise his daughter in a stable, loving home." She paused, letting the words hang in the air like a thread. Vivian Matthews, while successful, has failed to provide Emma with the stability she needs. Her career, her frequent travel, her work commitments, all of these factors have contributed to a life that leaves Emma at risk. Vivian clenched her fists, the words cutting deep. But she didn't let the anger rise. She wasn't here to fight with emotions. She was here to win. Natalie's voice remained steady, almost rehearsed. "Robert offers Emma a home where she will have the structure and support she deserves. A home where she will be able to thrive, with both parents in her life." Vivian's mind raced, but her focus remained unshaken. She didn't have to defend herself against Robert's manipulations anymore. She had the truth on her side. David rose to his feet, his presence commanding the room. "Your Honor," he said, his voice strong but composed, "the issue at hand is not whether Robert Collins has parental rights. The issue is whether he can provide a stable, loving environment for Emma. The evidence we've presented shows that Vivian Matthews has not only met, but exceeded the requirements for being a stable and loving mother. She is financially secure, emotionally invested, and has built a solid, loving home for Emma. He paused, looking directly at the judge. Vivian is Emma's anchor. She has created a home where Emma thrives, emotionally, physically, and academically. What Robert offers is not stability, it is insecurity, both financially and emotionally. David's words settled into the room, but Vivian's eyes remained fixed on the judge. She knew David was right. Every document, every testimony had painted the same picture. She was the one who had given Emma what she needed: love, structure, safety. Now she had to find her voice and speak directly to the judge. She stood slowly, the weight of the moment pressing down on her like a wave. For the first time in the trial, she felt the intensity of the room, not just as a participant, but as a mother. A mother who had fought tooth and nail to protect her daughter. She wasn't just speaking for herself anymore, she was speaking for Emma. "Your Honor," she began, her voice a little shaky at first but growing steadier with each word. "This isn't just about custody. This is about Emma's future. This is about the life I've built for her. A life that is filled with love, safety, and stability. Yes, my career is demanding. Yes, there are times when I have to be away. But I've made sure that my work never comes before Emma. Every decision I make is for her. Every moment I spend away is for our future together." She paused, her heart racing, but her gaze unwavering. "I'm not asking for pity. I'm asking for the right to raise my daughter, to continue to be the mother she knows, the one who has been there for every tear, every laugh, every moment of her life. I've been there for her, and I will always be there for her." Vivian could feel the eyes of everyone in the room on her. Robert and Carolyn were watching her closely, but their faces were a mask of disbelief. They hadn't expected this. They hadn't expected her to stand tall, to speak so fiercely. But Vivian was no longer just defending herself. She was defending her daughter's right to stay with the only mother she had ever known. Robert's lawyer opened her mouth to object, but the judge raised a hand, cutting her off. His voice was calm but firm. "I believe I've heard enough," he said, his eyes flicking from Vivian to Robert, then back to her. The weight of his words hit like a slow, deliberate drum beat. "I will make my decision soon. But let me be clear. This decision is not just about who has the rights to custody. It is about what is in the best interest of the child. The evidence is clear that Emma's emotional and financial stability depends on her continued relationship with her mother." The room fell into a thick silence as the judge leaned back in his chair, his gaze sharp. Vivian's heart pounded in her chest, her breath shallow. She had spoken the truth, her truth. And now it was up to him. She could feel her hands trembling, but she didn't look away. She didn't need to. Not now. This battle was nearly over. The truth had been spoken. The truth that Robert and Carolyn could no longer hide. The final decision would come soon. And Vivian knew one thing for certain. No matter the outcome, she had fought with everything she had. And she wouldn't stop fighting for Emma. The silence in the courtroom was deafening. Every second that passed seemed to stretch into eternity. Vivian sat motionless, her hands clenched tightly in her lap, her eyes fixed on the judge. The gavel had come down moments ago, signaling the end of the last hearing, and now the judge's decision loomed over her like an insurmountable wall. David stood beside her, his posture steady, but even he couldn't hide the faint tension in his jaw. Jennifer was beside her, her hand resting lightly on Vivian's arm, offering the quiet support that had become their unspoken ritual throughout the trial. Vivian's heart pounded in her chest, the weight of the entire trial crashing over her. All the evidence, all the testimonies, the sleepless nights, the moments of doubt, all of it had led to this moment. But she didn't feel triumph. Not yet. Not until the judge spoke. The judge's voice cut through the stillness like a blade. I have carefully reviewed the evidence presented by both sides. It is clear that this case has been marked by both passion and complexity. However, the most important consideration here is the well-being of Emma Collins. Her emotional and physical stability must be our primary concern. Vivian held her breath, each word from the judge pushing her deeper into the heart of the storm. After careful consideration, the judge continued, his voice even, I find that Vivian Matthews has provided a stable, loving, and secure home for her daughter. The evidence presented supports the claim that Emma's emotional and physical well-being are most securely met in her mother's care. Therefore, I am granting full custody of Emma Collins to Vivian Matthews. For a moment, the world seemed to freeze. Vivian blinked, not fully comprehending the words. Her body stiffened, a wave of relief washing over her, but it came with a suddenness that left her breathless. She couldn't move, couldn't speak, as the realization set in. She had won. David's hand on her shoulder snapped her back to reality. Vivian, he said quietly, his voice thick with emotion. You did it. You've got Emma. Vivian turned to him, her lips trembling, but she didn't allow the tears to fall just yet. This wasn't just her victory. It was Emma's. It was their future. Across the room, Robert and Carolyn sat motionless, their faces pale and stunned. Robert's expression had gone from smug confidence to shock. His eyes wide and unblinking as the judge's words hit him like a punch to the gut. Carolyn was still, her face contorted in disbelief. For once, she had nothing to say. Vivian's eyes flicked between them, but she quickly turned away, unwilling to allow their reactions to spoil the moment. This was her victory. She wasn't going to let them steal it from her. The judge continued, his voice unwavering. All claims made regarding Vivian Matthews' inability to care for her daughter have been dismissed. This court finds no evidence that Vivian has failed to meet the responsibilities of motherhood. I hereby grant her sole custody of Emma Collins. The finality of the words rang in Vivian's ears like a bell. She didn't feel the weight of the decision, not yet. Instead, a wave of calm washed over her. Like the first breath of fresh air after being submerged in water. The gavel came down with a sharp thud. This hearing is adjourned, the judge said, standing to leave. Vivian remained seated, her hands still shaking as the reality settled in. It was over. The battle was over. As the courtroom began to empty, Robert and Carolyn stood up. Robert was moving slowly, his posture rigid, his face pale and drawn. He didn't look at Vivian as he walked past her, but his eyes betrayed the defeat he could no longer hide. He was a man who had lost everything, his power, his control, and now his daughter. Vivian watched him walk out of the courtroom, her heart still racing but her mind clear. She could feel the weight of his absence in the room, but it didn't affect her. She had done what she came here to do. David leaned over, offering her a small but warm smile. You did it, Vivian, he said. You've shown the world just how strong you really are. Vivian nodded slowly, the relief beginning to settle into her bones. It was like every nerve had been on edge for so long. And now, finally, she could breathe again. She glanced at Jennifer, whose face lit up with a proud smile, and then her eyes fell on the empty chair next to her. Emma, the reason for everything. I couldn't have done it without you, Vivian whispered, her voice hoarse with emotion. David gave her a reassuring smile. You did it all on your own. You've given Emma the life she deserves. Vivian's heart swelled with love and pride. She thought of Emma's smile, her laughter, the way she had held her hand through everything. And now, Emma was safe. She was with her mother, where she belonged. As Vivian stepped out of the courtroom, she felt the sun breaking through the clouds. The future felt wide open, a promise of everything they could now build together. She didn't just win custody, she won Emma's future, and nothing, no one, could ever take that from her again. The days following the courtroom's final ruling were filled with a strange, almost surreal quiet. Vivian had won. She had fought for everything she believed in, for Emma's future, and for the life they had built together. Yet, as the victory settled in, it felt more like the calm after a storm than a cause for celebration. Vivian sat at her desk in her apartment, the soft hum of the city below filling the room as her fingers hovered over the keyboard. She was reviewing the final details of the case, how to move forward, how to ensure that Robert's manipulations wouldn't creep back into their lives, but she had one last thing to do, one final statement to make. She opened her email and attached the invoice for David's legal fees, a detailed breakdown of the hours, consultations, and research that had gone into ensuring Emma's future. It was time to send it to Robert's lawyer. Vivian's finger hesitated above the send button as she looked at the carefully calculated number on the screen. It wasn't just the amount. It was a statement. A final blow to a man who thought he could control everything with money, with power, with arrogance. She clicked send. The email was on its way to Robert's lawyer, Natalie Grayson. It was a quiet, calculated victory. One that sent a clear message. You wanted to play this game, Robert. Now, it's over. As Vivian leaned back in her chair, the satisfaction of the moment was palpable. Robert may have walked out of that courtroom defeated, but now he had to deal with the financial consequences of his actions. The look on his face when he realized the full extent of the costs would be priceless. Within an hour, her phone buzzed with a call. She didn't need to check the screen. She knew it was David. You did it, Vivian, he said, his voice warm, but there was an underlying satisfaction in his tone. I saw the email. That's a nice touch. Vivian smiled, the corner of her lips lifting ever so slightly. He needed to know there are consequences. He can't just throw his money around and think it solves everything. David chuckled softly. You've made your point. This is a victory, not just for Emma, but for you. No one can mess with you now. Vivian paused, her thoughts shifting back to the courtroom, to the finality of the judge's words. She had fought for so long, but now she could finally breathe. It's more than just winning, David. It's about making sure I don't lose myself in the process. There was a beat of silence before David responded, his voice softening. You've done more than win. You've reclaimed your life, your peace of mind. You've shown them that you're not someone they can manipulate. Vivian's heart swelled with a bittersweet relief. It wasn't just about getting Emma back. It was about rediscovering who she was, about standing tall and knowing that nothing could ever break her again. As she hung up, her phone buzzed again, but this time, it wasn't David. It was Emma. Vivian's heart skipped. She swiped to answer, already smiling. Hey, sweetie. Mom! Emma's voice came through the phone, bright and clear, like a sunbeam after a storm. I'm so happy. I can't believe it's finally over. You won, didn't you? Vivian's smile deepened, the warmth of her daughter's words washing over her. Yes, Emma, I did. I won. And you're staying with me. Forever. There was a pause. Then Emma's voice bubbled with relief. I'm so glad, Mom. I was really scared. I'm glad it's all over. Vivian's eyes closed briefly as she leaned back in her chair, the weight lifting from her chest for what felt like the first time in ages. It's over, sweetheart, and we're going to be okay. We're going to be better than okay. We're going to be just fine. Emma's laughter rang out, a sound that was pure joy, a sound Vivian had fought so hard to protect. I love you, Mom. I love you more, baby. Always have. Always will. As she ended the call, Vivian sat still for a long moment, letting the reality of what she had just achieved sink in. She had fought for her daughter's future, and now that future was secure. She could feel it deep in her bones. No more doubt, no more fear. They were free. Meanwhile, across town, Robert's fury was building. He hadn't expected it. He hadn't expected to lose the case, and he certainly hadn't expected Vivian to follow through with something as bold as the invoice for legal fees. The storm brewing inside him was one of utter disbelief, mingled with a cold rage. His control, his money, his manipulations, none of it had worked. Carolyn, standing beside him in their living room, watched as Robert stormed about, throwing his phone on the couch with disgust. "It's not over," he muttered, more to himself than to anyone else. "She's going to regret this. I'll make sure of it." But Vivian wasn't afraid of him anymore. She didn't need to be. She had won, and Robert had nothing left but his shattered ego. As Vivian looked out the window, the soft hum of the city below felt different now. Peaceful, hopeful, a fresh start. And nothing, no one, could ever take that from her again. The days after the courtroom victory were like the calm after a storm, but instead of peace, there was a quiet, determined energy that surged through Vivian. For the first time in what felt like years, she could breathe without the constant weight of Robert's manipulation hovering over her. She could feel her life starting to shift, the pieces of the puzzle she had been fighting for finally falling into place. The soft glow of early morning sunlight streamed through her apartment windows, casting a warm, golden hue across her desk. Vivian sat at the same place she had sat countless times before, but this time, it felt different. The pressure that had once weighed on her shoulders now felt like a distant memory. The struggle for control, the constant fight, the hours spent buried in legal documents, those were over. It was time to rebuild, to focus on the life she had been building all along. Her first priority, as always, was Emma. She looked over at her daughter, who was curled up on the couch with a book, the sound of her quiet laughter filling the room as she read aloud. Emma had always been her anchor, the light that guided her through the darkest times. But now Emma was even more of a treasure, safe, secure, and thriving. Vivian's heart swelled with pride. Emma had been through so much, yet she was blossoming with every passing day. The calm that had settled over their home wasn't just about winning the case. It was about the confidence they had in each other. They had survived the storm together, and now it was their time to rebuild. Vivian glanced down at her phone as it buzzed on the table. A message from Jennifer. "Let's get back to work, boss. Your business is waiting. It's time to show the world what we're capable of." Vivian smiled and typed back a quick response. "Let's do it." For too long, she had been bogged down by Robert's constant threats and manipulations, but now, she could focus on what really mattered. Her business, her dreams, her life. She dove into work with the kind of energy she hadn't felt in years. Each meeting, each new project, each moment spent building her empire felt like reclaiming a part of herself that had been buried for far too long. But as Vivian focused on her own growth, Robert was not done yet. He had underestimated her strength. Even in defeat, he couldn't accept the loss. His phone calls had become more frequent, his attempts to bully her into submission still lingering in the air like a bad odor. He tried to pull strings behind the scenes, sending legal threats, making veiled comments through his network. But Vivian was no longer afraid. She wasn't the woman he could manipulate anymore. She wasn't the woman who would cower under his control. Every attempt he made to regain control only showed him for what he was, a man desperate to hold on to something he had already lost. Each of his feeble attempts fell flat. And with every failed effort, Vivian felt freer. The weight of his shadow no longer loomed over her. She was free. Free to live her life. free to be the mother she wanted to be, the businesswoman she had always dreamed of becoming, free to make her own choices. As the days turned into weeks, Vivian began to notice changes not just in herself, but in Emma too. The little girl who had once been caught in the middle of a bitter battle was blossoming, her confidence growing with every passing day. She was more open, more joyful, more at ease. She had the freedom to just be, to be a child, to be loved, and to be herself without the weight of uncertainty. Vivian smiled as she watched Emma draw pictures at the kitchen table, her crayons scattered in every direction. There was no tension in the air anymore, no underlying fear, only a quiet sense of contentment. But Vivian knew she couldn't just stop here. She had fought for Emma's future, and now she would fight for other women, other mothers, who found themselves in situations like hers. The victory in court wasn't just about her and Emma. It was about ensuring that others would have the strength to fight back too. The idea had been building in her mind for a while, and now it was taking shape. Vivian began working with Jennifer to establish a foundation, a safe haven for single mothers fighting for their rights. It would offer legal support, financial advice, and, most importantly, a community of women who could lift each other up, a place where they could find strength, resources, and hope. As the foundation took root, Vivian found herself speaking at events, telling her story to other women who had been through the same kinds of struggles. It was empowering, helping others reclaim their lives, just as she had done. One afternoon, as she was preparing for a speech at a local women's event, her phone buzzed with a familiar number. It was Emma. "Hi, Mom." Emma's voice was bright, filled with excitement. "Guess what? I got an award at school today. It's for being the best helper in class." Vivian's heart soared. "I'm so proud of you, sweetie. I knew you were going to do amazing things. You're so strong, just like your mom." Emma giggled. "I learned from the best." Vivian chuckled, feeling the love and joy fill her. "And you're going to keep shining, Emma. I'll always be here, cheering you on." As the call ended, Vivian sat back in her chair, feeling a deep sense of peace. She had been through the fire, and now she was on the other side, stronger, more confident, and more certain of who she was. And most importantly, she had Emma by her side. The life they were building together was one of freedom, empowerment, and hope. Vivian had fought for it all, and now she was living it. And as she looked out the window, the city stretching before her, she knew that the best was yet to come. The years that followed Vivian's courtroom victory were a testament to her resilience, and more importantly, to the strength of the family she had fought so fiercely to protect. It wasn't just about securing Emma's future, it was about creating a legacy that would empower others to stand tall, to fight, and to never back down. Vivian's foundation, which had started as an idea born from her own struggle, flourished beyond her wildest expectations. What had once been a small, grassroots effort to help single mothers navigate the complexities of family law had quickly expanded into a nationwide network of support. Legal advice, financial literacy, therapy services, and a safe, welcoming community. Vivian had built a place where women could find not just help, but hope. There was no greater reward than hearing the stories of women who had walked through her foundation's doors and left empowered, ready to reclaim their lives. In these moments, Vivian felt the weight of her journey truly transform into something larger than herself. It was at a gala one crisp autumn evening, as Vivian stood before a crowded ballroom, that she realized just how far she had come. She had been invited to speak at the annual Women's Empowerment Awards, an event honoring those who had made significant contributions to the fight for women's rights. As the applause filled the room, Vivian glanced down at her black dress, simple, elegant, understated, and couldn't help but smile. She was no longer the woman she used to be, consumed by fear, by the need to prove her worth to Robert, to herself, to the world. She was a woman who had risen from the ashes and built something lasting, a legacy that would continue to help others long after she was gone. As she took the stage, the spotlight was almost blinding, but it didn't faze her. She had stood in far darker places and walked through them alone. This was her moment, not to boast, but to reflect. "Thank you," she began, her voice steady and strong, "for this incredible honor. I stand here today not just as a mother, but as a woman who has been given the chance to rebuild, to reclaim what was taken from me, and to help others do the same. We all have the power to change our lives, to rise above the battles we face, and to find strength we didn't know we had. And when we do, we have a responsibility to help others find that same strength." The room fell silent, hanging on her every word. She had always been an introvert, more comfortable in the background, but tonight, the stage felt right. This was where her story had led her. It was no longer just her journey. It was about all the women who had found a voice in the quiet corners of their own lives, who had learned to trust themselves again. "We are not defined by the battles we face," she continued, "but by the courage we find to fight them. And together, we can create a future where no woman has to fight alone." As the applause erupted, Vivian's thoughts drifted to Emma, who had grown into a confident, compassionate young woman. She had always been strong, but now, more than ever, she radiated a sense of purpose. Vivian had raised Emma in a home where love, security, and strength were the foundation. She had seen her daughter blossom, her confidence growing with every passing year. Emma was proud of her mother, but more importantly, she was proud of who she was becoming. She had learned resilience from the strongest woman she knew. Vivian had made sure Emma understood one thing above all else: you are enough. She had been enough from the moment she was born, and nothing, not even Robert, could change that. As the foundation grew, so did Vivian's business. She expanded her company's reach, making it one of the most successful women-led enterprises in the country. Her success wasn't about the money, it was about the impact. With every new partnership, every new contract, Vivian was able to funnel more resources into the foundation, ensuring that other women would have the same opportunities she had fought for. But as her legacy continued to grow, Robert faded into obscurity. His attempts to regain control over his life, over Vivian's, had fallen flat. His money no longer held the power it once did, and his reputation, once built on manipulation and deceit, had crumbled. He was just another man from the past, his voice no longer carrying the weight it once had. Vivian watched as he tried to resurface at social events, to claw his way back into the circles that had once elevated him. But no one was listening anymore, not when his lies had been exposed, not when Vivian's strength had become a beacon for so many. One day, as Vivian sat at her desk, reviewing some new proposals for the foundation, her phone buzzed. It was an unfamiliar number. Hesitant but curious, she answered. "Vivian Matthews?" a voice asked, the tone sharp, businesslike. "Yes, this is she," Vivian replied, her guard up but her curiosity piqued. "This is an invitation to a meeting from the Women's Leadership Circle," the voice continued. "We've been following your work, and we'd like to formally recognize your contributions. We'd also like to discuss how we can work together to expand the work you've already begun." Vivian's heart skipped a beat. A recognition? A partnership? She sat back, momentarily stunned. The thought that she, Vivian Matthews, was being invited into circles of influence and leadership she had once only dreamed of was both humbling and exhilarating. But she knew one thing for certain. This wasn't about titles. It wasn't about recognition. It was about creating a future where Emma and every woman who walked through her doors could walk through life with their heads held high, knowing they didn't have to fight alone. "Thank you," Vivian said, her voice calm yet strong. "I'll be there." As she ended the call, she looked out the window, her gaze drifting over the skyline of the city she had built her life in. She thought of all the women she had helped, all the lives she had touched, and of Emma, the girl who had been her reason to keep fighting. The legacy she had built was no longer just hers. It was theirs. And the best part? She was just getting started. Vivian Matthews sat at her desk, her fingers poised over her laptop keyboard. It had been years since the courtroom battle that had changed everything for her and Emma. And now, as she reflected on all that had transpired, she couldn't help but marvel at how far she had come. The foundation she had built for single mothers, the booming success of her business, the women whose lives she had touched, all of it had been part of the plan she had fought so hard to create. The phone buzzed on the desk, a new notification lighting up the screen. Vivian reached for it, her pulse quickening as she read the name that flashed across the screen. Global Women's Conference. Invitation to speak. She blinked, her heart fluttering in her chest. An invitation to speak at a global conference? She had worked tirelessly to build her name and her foundation, but this was something entirely different. It wasn't just a local recognition. This was global. A platform to speak to thousands of women around the world, to stand for everything she had worked for, everything she had fought for. Her fingers hovered above the screen, the weight of the moment sinking in. She had been invited to speak on a global stage, to share her story with the very women she had spent her life empowering. The truth of her journey, of surviving, of thriving, was about to be heard on an entirely new level. Without a second thought, she tapped the accept button, feeling a sense of purpose rush through her like electricity. The future she had claimed was now going to be shared with the world. She was no longer just a woman who had survived. She was a woman who was now thriving, leading, teaching, inspiring. As Vivian prepared for the upcoming conference, life continued its rhythm. Robert, once the man who had controlled so much of her world, was now a distant figure. His attempts to sabotage her career had been laughable. He had tried sending veiled threats, using old contacts to spread rumors, but his efforts fell flat. No one cared anymore. His manipulations had no power over her, and he knew it. Her focus was now entirely on Emma, her daughter, her reason for every decision, for every move. Emma, now a teenager, had grown into someone beyond Vivian's wildest dreams. She was confident, intelligent, and filled with the kind of quiet strength that only came from having witnessed the power of resilience. Vivian had given her everything she could: love, support, a safe home, and Emma had flourished under it. She had become her mother's greatest achievement. "Mom, are you ready for the conference?" Emma asked one evening as she sat on the couch, her schoolbooks spread across the table in front of her. She was a quiet, steady presence now, so much like Vivian had been when she was her age, but Emma was far more grounded, far more secure in who she was. Vivian looked at her daughter, her heart full. "I think I'm ready, sweetie. It's a big opportunity, but I'm more excited about what it means. For all of us." Emma smiled, her face lighting up with pride. "I'm proud of you, Mom. You've done so much. You've changed lives." Vivian felt a swell of emotion rise within her chest, a wave of love and gratitude for the life they had built together. Emma's words were more than just pride. They were a recognition of all the hard work, all the sacrifices, and every sleepless night spent thinking of how to make a better future for her. "I couldn't have done it without you, Emma," Vivian said softly. "You've been my strength." The conference was everything Vivian had imagined, and more. She stood before a packed auditorium, the bright lights of the stage casting long shadows over the crowd. The room was filled with women from every corner of the world, each one there to hear from those who had walked the difficult paths, who had fought for their place in the world. Vivian wasn't just there to speak. She was there to stand with every woman in that room, to share the lessons she had learned, and to give hope to those still struggling. Every woman has a story, Vivian said into the microphone, her voice steady and strong. And those stories are powerful. Our voices are powerful. It's time we stop letting fear hold us back. The world will not define us. We will define it. The applause that followed was deafening, and Vivian felt the weight of every woman's eyes on her. She wasn't just telling her story, she was giving them permission to tell theirs. She was creating a future where every woman, no matter her background or struggle, had the right to stand tall and claim her place. As she finished her speech, the roar of the crowd was overwhelming. Vivian stepped off the stage, her heart racing. But there was something new, a sense of peace. This was who she was now. Not just a survivor, but a leader. A woman who had rebuilt her life, her business, and her legacy. And she wasn't done yet. Back home, Emma was thriving, feeling the weight of her mother's success with pride, but also with her own sense of purpose. She had plans now, dreams of her own. And though she had always admired her mother, it was now clear to her that she would follow in those same footsteps. Not in exact ways, but in the pursuit of what mattered most: strength, resilience, and the willingness to change the world. As Vivian watched her daughter, she realized something. They had both claimed their futures, and together, they were unstoppable. In the weeks following the conference, Vivian continued to expand her business, her foundation, and her impact. She used her success as a platform to support others, ensuring that the legacy she built would carry on for generations. Her work didn't stop. But now, it wasn't about the fight anymore. It was about building something that would last, something that would empower every woman who came after her. Vivian's phone buzzed again. Another invitation for a speaking engagement, another recognition of the impact she was making. But as she looked at her phone, a smile crossed her face. Not because of the recognition, but because she knew something now. She was exactly where she was meant to be. And with Emma by her side, she was ready for whatever came next. They had fought for this future together. And nothing, no one, could ever take it from them. The morning light filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Vivian's office, casting a soft glow over the sleek, modern furnishings. Her desk was impeccably organized, each piece in its place, reflecting the calm order she had created in her life. It was a stark contrast to the chaos of her past, the turmoil that once threatened to swallow her whole. But today, as she sat behind that desk, she could feel a deep sense of pride in how far she had come. Her phone buzzed again. Another message. Another invitation. This time, it was an official notification of an award, the National Women's Empowerment Award for Outstanding Contributions to Social Justice. It wasn't the first recognition she had received, nor would it be the last. Her work had taken on a life of its own, spreading across communities, touching lives, and empowering women around the world. Vivian smiled, not out of arrogance, but from a quiet satisfaction. She had worked hard for every accolade, every honor that came her way. But these awards weren't just about her. They were a testament to the women she had helped, to the countless stories she had touched, to the cause she had dedicated herself to. She had fought not only for Emma's future, but for every woman who found herself caught in the same struggle, fighting for their rights, their voice, their dignity. Her phone rang, interrupting her thoughts. It was David. "Vivian," he said, his voice warm but with the weight of a familiar pride. "Congratulations again. This latest award is huge. You're making waves." Vivian chuckled softly, leaning back in her chair. "Thanks, David. It feels like everything is falling into place, but it's not about the awards. It's about what we're building." David's tone shifted to something more reflective. "I know, but you've earned it. You've earned respect, not just for the foundation, but for your commitment to justice. You've been a voice for women who had none. It's powerful. The words hung in the air for a moment, and Vivian let them settle. It was true. The path she had walked, from the fight in the courtroom to now being a recognized advocate for women's rights, had been long and filled with challenges. But with each step, she had gained not just respect, but influence. People listened when she spoke. They believed in her because she had been through it, because she had proven that change wasn't just possible, it was necessary. But even as she reached new heights, Vivian knew Robert was still watching from afar. She could feel his presence, not physically, but in the subtle way he tried to manipulate from the shadows. His attempts to discredit her in the past had failed miserably, and now he had become little more than a faded figure in her life. The man who once sought to control her was now irrelevant, a ghost in the machine. From time to time, his name would appear in the press, his failed businesses, his lawsuits. But it no longer held the same weight. People had seen his true nature, and the walls he had built around his influence were crumbling. Vivian, on the other hand, had built her legacy on truth and resilience. She had fought for what was right, and she had earned the respect of those who mattered. As Vivian read the message on her phone, a congratulatory note from one of her business partners, her thoughts drifted to Emma. The girl who had been her anchor throughout it all, the girl who had watched her mother fight, not just for a better future for herself, but for a world that would one day be better for her too. Emma was thriving now, a confident, articulate teenager who had blossomed into someone who had not only learned from her mother's example, but had become a force in her own right. She was excelling at school, pursuing her passions with the same drive and determination Vivian had instilled in her. But it wasn't just about grades or success. It was about confidence. Emma had a solid foundation, a belief in herself that would carry her through whatever challenges life threw at her. One evening, as Vivian was preparing dinner, Emma walked into the kitchen, her backpack slung over one shoulder, her eyes bright with excitement. "Mom, I made it into a special program at school for young leaders. They've noticed the work I've been doing in the community, and they want me to be a part of it," Emma said, practically glowing with pride. Vivian turned to face her, her heart swelling with emotion. "That's amazing, Emma. I'm so proud of you." Emma smiled, her eyes shining with the same fire that had once driven Vivian. "I learned from the best, Mom." The words landed like a soft caress, but they carried a weight that left Vivian momentarily speechless. Emma had watched her mother's every move, had learned the lessons of resilience, strength, and determination. And now, Emma was poised to carve her own path. As Vivian hugged her daughter tightly, a profound sense of peace washed over her. She had built this life. She had fought for this future. And now, she could watch her daughter grow into the woman she had always known she could be, strong, self-assured, and unshakable. Vivian returned to her office later that evening, the weight of the day lifting from her shoulders. Her work was far from over. There were more women to help, more injustices to fight, more battles to win. But for the first time in years, she didn't feel the relentless pressure of a fight for survival. She had already won. She had found herself, and she had found her purpose. And as the door to her office clicked shut behind her, she looked out the window at the skyline of New York, the city that had been her battleground, her refuge, and now, her symbol of success. The world was at her feet, but her greatest accomplishment, her greatest legacy, was sitting at home, growing into the young woman she had always dreamed she could be. Vivian smiled to herself. This is just the beginning. And the world would hear her voice. Vivian Matthews sat in her office, watching as her foundation's impact continued to ripple across the nation. What had once been a small initiative had grown into a powerful network, reaching thousands of women across the country. The programs she had put in place, offering legal support, financial education, and mental health resources, had empowered women to fight back against injustices they once thought insurmountable. Each letter of gratitude, each success story, each life transformed, filled Vivian with a deep sense of purpose. She had built something real, something lasting. Her phone buzzed again, pulling her from her thoughts. It was a message from one of her program directors. "We're expanding into 5 more cities this year. The demand is overwhelming." Vivian smiled, her heart swelling. It was a far cry from the fear and uncertainty that had once consumed her life. The quiet victory was now a full-blown movement, and there was no turning back. She wasn't just helping women. She was changing the narrative. But it wasn't just about the foundation. It was also about her advocacy. Vivian remained at the forefront of the fight for women's rights in family courts, sharing her story at every opportunity. She had been through the battles herself, and now, she was the voice for those who had no voice, the one who stood tall against the systems that sought to silence them. On a crisp autumn day, Vivian stood before a crowd at a national conference on family law reform. The audience was filled with legal professionals, advocates, and lawmakers. But for Vivian, this wasn't just another speaking engagement. This was a moment to push forward, to ensure that the work she'd started would continue to reverberate long after she was gone. "When I was fighting for Emma's future," she began, her voice clear and steady, "I wasn't just fighting for myself. I was fighting for every woman who has been told she doesn't have the right to her own life, her own children. I fought for a future where women are seen as equals in the eyes of the law, where no one is stripped of their dignity because they're a mother. That fight doesn't end when the case is closed. It continues until every woman is free to live her truth." The applause was immediate, and Vivian's heart swelled with pride. It wasn't about the applause. It was about the movement she was a part of. The stories she had shared, the power she had inspired in others, were beginning to create change. Slowly but steadily, the tide was turning. Back at home, Emma continued to thrive. Vivian watched her daughter grow with a sense of pride, awe, and joy. Emma had not only grown into a confident young woman, but she had also embraced the values Vivian had instilled in her: resilience, empathy, and the drive to make a difference. She had excelled in school, joined various leadership programs, and started advocating for young girls in her own community. "Mom, I'm applying for a fellowship with the Youth Leadership Council," Emma said one evening, her voice filled with excitement. "I want to work on projects that help underprivileged girls find their voice, just like you helped me find mine." Vivian smiled, her heart full. "Emma, you've already made a difference. You're exactly where you're meant to be." Emma had not only followed in her footsteps, but had taken her own path, one that was uniquely hers, shaped by the strength of Vivian's example. It was a legacy in itself. Vivian knew that Emma would continue to carry the torch, lighting the way for future generations. As Vivian's influence continued to grow, she received recognition from various humanitarian organizations, from awards for her work in women's rights to public recognition for her unwavering commitment to justice. Yet, she remained grounded. The accolades were appreciated, but they didn't define her. The mission did. Each day brought new opportunities to amplify her voice, whether it was through media appearances, speaking engagements, or legislative advocacy. But through it all, she remained focused on her foundation and the women she served. She was now more than a survivor. She was a leader. And her legacy was not just in the awards or recognition, but in the countless lives she had touched, the futures she had helped to shape. In the quiet moments, when the applause had faded, when the speeches were done, Vivian would reflect on the journey that had brought her here. It was a journey filled with pain, loss, and hardship. But it was also filled with triumph, growth, and love. She had fought not only for Emma's future, but for every woman who had ever been told she wasn't enough, who had been made to feel less than. And now she had given them the strength to reclaim their own. As Vivian looked out the window, her eyes tracing the skyline of the city she had built her life in, she felt the weight of her legacy settle in. Robert may have tried to tear it all down. He may have tried to control her, break her, silence her. But in the end, he hadn't touched her legacy. It had only grown stronger. They tried to destroy everything I built. They never touched my legacy. Vivian stood tall, the future ahead of her, the mission before her, and the knowledge that nothing, no one, could ever take what she had worked for. Her legacy was secured, and it would continue to grow.